Well, hello. My name is John Ferguson. I am a field engineer with Pivotal. So for those of you who don't know, Pivotal was the original steward of Cloud Foundry. We're going to talk a lot about what is Cloud Foundry, right? There's been this sort of movement around platform as a service and all of this good stuff. But so who am I? You can follow me on Twitter if you want. It's usually relatively inane things and just kind of ramblings that come out of my mind, but once in a while entertaining. I used to be at VMware as part of the Cloud Application Platform team. We used to call the VCAP team. I really like musical theater. I have a 6-month-old, and I generally enjoy relatively geeky things. Hence, I'm here with all of you today. But we want to talk about innovation, right? And we all have a day job. Well, I like to think I have a day job sometimes. We work for enterprises. We work for companies. Why do enterprises actually care about innovation? Well, one of the interesting things is if you look at the churn of the S&P 500, the companies that have come in primarily are based on technology, right? They're based on software. And the ones that have come out are those who have failed to actually adopt that concept. There's this really great article. It's been parroted around. Everybody's talked about it 100,000 times. Mark Andreessen wrote it. Software is eating the world, right? But if you look at the valuations of these companies, they are in traditional industries, and they're completely changing the way we do it, right? Look at all the controversy around Uber. Look at all what's going on with Airbnb, right? They're changing these traditional enterprises, these traditional industries, and they're using software to do it, right? That's what's really eating at these enterprises. In order to try and go after that, they need to be more innovative. Okay, so we're here to talk about Cloud Foundry. It's a platform. So what are some of the characteristics of what an innovative platform should be? So I know it's a little bit of an eye chart and lots of text, right? But these are really important characteristics. I need to have consistency of my environments. I need to be able to very easily provision out environments, right? I'm taking this sort of dial tone from I go get a virtual machine to I go get middleware that's already pre-installed to I have a platform where I just bring my app, right? Application dial tone. Application is the unit of deployment. And that really characterizes a platform that helps us go through this sort of innovation that needs to happen. And really what we're seeing is it comes down to this bottom one is there's this whole movement towards the idea of microservices, right, and continuous delivery. So how do we start to have a platform that actually enables us to take advantage of those different architectures and paradigms? Cloud Foundry. Oh, who'd have guessed, right? So we really think that you need to have a very, very different approach to building software, right? From a developer perspective, we want to be able to have a much better experience. I want to be able to just deploy my application. Let me focus on my code and not worry necessarily about the infrastructure. I want to be able to very quickly deploy that code to get it out there. I want to start to be able to embrace microservices, work on lots of small things, versus one big thing, right? Because now I'm thinking about scaling things independently. I have teams that are not focused around, sort of, there's a DBA and UI specialists and middleware. I'm taking teams that are more business capability focused. And I need a platform that allows me to work that way. However, that becomes an operator's freaking nightmare. You want to have lots of little things, so you're going to have like thousands of virtual machines running around. We need to have a platform that actually manages all of that so that operations can come in and say, hey, here's the infrastructure, here's your network compute and storage, and I'm going to help you manage that platform, but you're going to take advantage of it from an on-demand access to those resources. So the best way to look at Cloud Foundry is actually see it in action. So I'm going to jump out of slides because I think slides get pretty boring pretty quickly. What I have is a nothing. I have a WAR file, right? Java, web application, pretty traditional. It's built with Spring Boot. So if you're a Java developer and you haven't seen Spring Boot and you've been working and looking at Spring, you need to go check it out, right? The Spring community has completely exploded in the use of this technology. It just makes building software so much easier. But it's going to be a web application. So what do? Well, I'm going to actually interact with Cloud Foundry. I'm going to push my WAR file, and let's call it ATO 14 CF demo, right? So that's going to be my host. Oops. Oh yeah, I'm in the wrong directory. Push ATO 14 CF demo. Now, what am I doing here? So I'm interacting with Cloud Foundry. I'm saying, hey, Cloud Foundry, I'm going to use this default manifest file. So I have a YAML file that describes, hey, here's where the war file lives, here's what the name of it is, here's some memory reservation, and here's how many instances I want, right? These are just questions that we normally want to answer. We usually have to answer them on some kind of a ticket that we open with ops, right? But we're just going to answer them because that's standard how I'm going to actually deploy my application. Now, one of the big things around Cloud Foundry is I don't want to worry about going out and configuring something like my load balancer, right? Many of you have probably changed config files for Apache HTTPD, and it is miserable. If I ever have to look at one of those conf files again, I will just fall apart. It hurts me inside. So dynamic routing, right? I give an app, I tell what I want for my domain, and it just does it for me, right? Well, what about the runtime? What about the middleware, right? Strangely, not strangely, maybe we kind of saw this coming, middleware is starting to become a commodity, right? We don't normally care nowadays that we're running on WebSphere, WebLogic, JBoss, or Tomcat. We just care, hey, I can take my Java application and bring it to something that provides me the right runtime, right? We're really getting away from caring about proprietary APIs and moving towards more of an open model where I can build my software as a self-contained piece and not have to worry that the runtime under the covers is providing me some proprietary things. Okay, great. So this says, hey, I did all this stuff for you. But what did we do? We said, hey, CF, Cloud Foundry, I'm going to push my application, and here's my host for it. So did it actually deploy it? Let's go check it out. It tells me what the URL is. I can come out to the interwebs. And I have an application. All right, so this is my Spring Boot application. It's it's an orders application. It's going to show me, hey, when I start up some data service that I'm actually seeing where these orders are coming in. Okay, cool. Well, what really happened under the covers? Well, let's go back and take a quick gander. We created the app, right? We took the name, created this route. We did this dynamic routing, right? I didn't have to configure some load balancer somewhere. I uploaded my file, and then I did something really interesting. I did this concept of staging. What staging is in Cloud Foundry you have this concept of build packs, because one of the main tenets for an innovation platform to enable things like continuous delivery, I need to have consistent environments throughout the entire process, right? If my test environment is different from my production environment, all that testing I do in test is completely worthless, right? I need to have consistency across that. And Cloud Foundry uses this concept of build packs to say, hey, when I go and deploy my application, what I stand up as at runtime is this. And every single time you do it, this is what you set up, all right? Now what's nice is that Cloud Foundry, there's been this whole sort of movement towards containers, right? Docker, 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 Docker. I like Docker, it's cool. We've been embracing containers for a very long time from a Cloud Foundry perspective because we think you have to isolate your resources that way to take advantage of putting as much stuff into a virtual machine as possible. So what we do is we take our application, we put it together with that build pack, we call that whole thing together a droplet, and we put that in a container inside of Cloud Foundry. And it runs, right? Now, if we look here, it says, hey, no RabbitMQ service bound, streaming is not active. It's not really doing anything, right? So one of the big tenets of Cloud Foundry is providing services to our applications and managing them and connecting to them in a consistent way. So there's no magic here. I tell Cloud Foundry, hey, here's my service. And service could be a RabbitMQ instance. It could be connection information out to DB2. Sorry. It could be information about how to connect out to a Hadoop cluster. What's the name node, right? What it all really comes down to is I want to provide my apps consistently access to all of these different services. But again, it's that consistency that's pretty important. So what I've done is I've actually CF services. Let me get it up here a little bit. CF services. I have provisioned out, I'm actually using AppDirect. So this is on Pivotal Web Services, which is the open public Cloud Foundry. You can go out today, sign up, just go play around with it. But on there, I'm using AppDirect to provision out Cloud AMQP. So it's a RabbitMQ server. And so what I want to do now is I'm always really bad about remembering what the commands are here. Where's my, oh, it's -f. _services. YAML. I'm giving it now a different manifest, right? Actually, let's take a look at these manifests because I think it helps to illustrate the point. So my manifest file here, can you guys see this okay? Is it a little blurry, tough-ish? All right, so basically what I'm saying here is, hey, I have an application. My name is now this, my memory instances, my host name, my target. And then I'm saying services PCF Rabbit. PCF Rabbit is just a logical name, right? So my applications are working in terms of logical names. Now, if you think about that in an enterprise, dev, test, staging, pre-prod, production, which specific service that's being provided is going to be different in all of those. But if my application relies on it in a logical name, I don't have to change my code from environment to environment, right? This is inverting that idea of putting our connection information into the properties file, right? We want to be able to say, hey, we could open source our code today. But if we have connection information, whether it's a properties file or an actual source code, we can't do that. So invert it. Have the environment provide that specific information, right? And we'll actually see that. So CF push manifest with services, and we'll call this ATO 14 demo 2. Oh, not each. So what I'm doing now is, oops. Oh, thank you. That's why I like to do this in public. See, at Pivotal, we actually believe in pair programming, so this is pair conference presenting. What I'm doing here is I'm pushing now my second version of the application, all right? So I've got my other one running, and if we go back, hey, it's running, right? I haven't taken it down. But I'm going to push this new version up. So how many people have heard of blue-green deployments, right? So it's strategy. Great. So it's a strategy that I can sort of bring up my green version, and then I can have my route be mapped to both of them, and then when I'm ready, I take the blue version out, and now the green version is the real one, right? So Cloud Foundry makes this really, 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 really easy. So I'm deploying my second version, right? It's going through the same process. It's creating a route, now different from my original one, because I want to smoke test it. I want to make sure that thing's up and running. It's going to create this droplet like we were talking about, and then it's going to put that into a container. And then it's going to be running, and I can go look at it by itself. But I want to do that blue-green deployment. I want to change my gold URL, essentially, to point to this new version. So while that's coming up, come on, build pack, build pack, build pack. One of the interesting things that people do when they see this, they kind of say, well, John, do I have to open like tickets? Like, what about that whole process that I go through today? Well, this whole idea is to have your IT staff and organizations kind of approve this as a platform, and then developers can come in and just get this on demand. It fundamentally changes the way we start to look at DevOps, right? Now, whatever your definition of DevOps is, right, there's hundreds of thousands of them at this point. One of the key characteristics we need to have is this separation of concern, right? Operations teams focus on operations and infrastructure. Development teams focus on development. So we need to have a way to kind of do this separation, but at the same time, a place to actually bring them together so that I, as operations, can actually provide that infrastructure. What's going on? And as a developer, I just interact with that platform. But I'm still starting to enable that communication, right? I'm looking at it from which perspective? Stuck in the build pack. So let's go, maybe I just lost my connection here. So this is the UI that comes with Cloud Foundry. This is actually something that's part of Pivotal CF. So Pivotal as a company offers out a commercial version, an enterprise version of Cloud Foundry. And this is one of the things that they do and provide is this nice UI. But let's take a look at my app here. Here we go. Now it's starting to go. That was weird. What Cloud Foundry has done is create this environment where, and we'll kind of talk through it a little bit. I hope I don't run out of too much time, but I think the demo is important, is it allows me to start thinking about things in smaller packages, right? So microservices, right? Microservices is this idea that I build small services that have single responsibility, right? They're focused on either a noun or a verb, so account, product, customer, shipping, warehousing, credit card processing, right? They're all individual services. Now, traditionally, what I would have done is slam them all together in one monolithic application, and that had all these APIs on it. But nowadays, I want to be able to independently scale those pieces. In a monolithic architecture, I can't do that because I have to, if I want to scale accounts, I have to scale everything else with it. If I want to change product, I now have to test everything else as a holistic unit. Now, the nice thing is in that architecture, my deployment is a single deployment, right? I'm not deploying all sorts of different things. I'm only managing and deploying one thing. In a microservice architecture, though, I'm deploying lots of little things. So I've gained independence, but I've done it at the cost of deployment complexity, right? With Cloud Foundry, though, if the platform is managing that, if it's keeping your apps up and running, and well, actually, I'll kill my application and see it come back up, now that kind of operations nightmare starts to go away. So let's take a look here, now that it's done. The funny part is I'm like, oh, that was really, really slow. But if you tried to do that in a traditional enterprise, that was, what was that, 2 weeks probably? Maybe a couple days. So, I've got my second version, right? It says data being streamed, so let's start that data stream, right? And now I've got data. But I'm on version 2. If I go to my gold URL, right, which is ATO 14 CF demo, I'm not going to go to the new version. Instead, what I need to do is I need to map that gold route to my new version. So CF map route, it's going to take an app, which we're calling, what did I call it? CF apps. Oh yeah. So CF map route A214, or sorry, PCF demo with services, right? That's my second version. That's the app that I deployed. I'm going to make the domain cfapps.io, and then the host, I want to map this app to the URL that belongs to the first version, right? Because that's my gold URL. So ATO 14 CF demo. Come back here. Come on. So now, data being streamed from Rabbit, right? I'm on my new version. Gold URL, but I've actually got data coming in here. I don't know why it's flashing like that. It's bizarre, right? So it's working, right? So now what I've got is version 1 and version 2 underneath the same URL. Okay, let me go unmap that other one. So I've now done the full deployment. Unmap route of PCF demo from ATO 14 CF demo. And now every time I refresh this, I'm going to be getting my second version. What's cool about this, I had no downtime, right? So from an innovation perspective, I can start putting things in front of my customers. I can start to do things like A/B testing, start to enable a lot of these interesting strategies. And I don't have to have an interruption to my service, right? I don't know how many people have suffered through the credit card problem, right? We're going down on Sunday morning from 2 a.m. to 3 a.m. for maintenance. No, throw that away. Like, let's not have to deal with that anymore, right? But the platform helps me manage that. Now, what about scaling, right? I want to be able to scale. So what I can do is I can issue a command to PCF demo with services, right? Because I'm calling it by an app, right? My app is the unit of deployment. That's what I work with. That's my domain. And I want it to be 3 instances instead of just 1. Think about that. In your traditional enterprise now, if you want another couple of instances, open up the ticket, have somebody spin up some virtual machines, set up your middleware, or maybe your enterprise has actually gone a little bit further, right, where you can actually go into a portal and request a virtual machine that already has Tomcat on top of it. Great, that's step 1. But what about the app? You still have to deploy the app and go through that whole process. Instead, I just said, hey, scale it up. So right now we see instance index 0. Now it's 1. Now it's 0. Now it's 1. Now it's 0, right? So I have these instances out there. They've been created for me. They've automatically been put under the load balancer, and I'm being dynamically routed where I need to go. Sweet. But what if one of them crashes? I put a system exit in here because I'm mean. So I'm going to kill one of my apps, right? One of my versions. And if I look here and refresh, if I catch it in time, come on, Wi-Fi. I've got one down. Uh-oh, is my app down? Nope, still good. I'm running, right? That's just basic clustering because I've got more than one instance behind it. The router says, hey, all right, you're down, so I'm just going to reroute my traffic all over here. Well, okay, that's fine, but if all of my instances just start to fall over, right, and nothing restarts them, I'm still going to get that call in the middle of the night. I don't want to get that call in the middle of the night. I already have problems sleeping because I have a 6-month-old, all right? I won't want to have people calling and say, my app's down, fix it. No, I need some kind of self-healing. I want the platform to manage it for me. So if I go back in now, running, it restarted it for me. It said, hey, your app's down. All right, let me go take that instance. You're supposed to be running. You're supposed to have 3 instances. You only have 2. Hey, Cloud Controller, which is this piece in Cloud Foundry, go start it back up. All right, you got it, right? And now we back up to 3. That's really cool, right? The platform manages it for us. That's Cloud Foundry at a glance, right? Think about what that starts to enable for you as developers. How can you now how can you get away from thinking about, all right, I need a virtual machine, I need to install the middleware, and instead start thinking, hey, this is the service I want to build, or this is the UI I want to build, right? Whether it's in Ruby or Go or Java or PHP or, frankly, whatever languages start coming out, Cloud Foundry gives you the ability to say, hey, I'm going to create a runtime for you and actually give you the ability to run those applications. Pretty cool? Everybody's like, I just want to go to the social event. I'm done. All right. So I'm going to kind of skip a little bit here because I really want to show kind of what we're doing. So that's Cloud Foundry today, right? We're an open source project. We're making changes. We're constantly developing. Pivotal CF, the enterprise version of Cloud Foundry, right? We release every 90 days. The open source projects, there's usually a production release every couple of days, right? So we really are trying to embrace this constant of change. Like that is a constant for us, right? There's pi and phi, and then there's change. However, it's been built in a way, in a microservice type architecture. Each component does one thing really well. We embrace this idea of anti-fragility, right? So if you read Russ Miles and a lot of his stuff around anti-fragile microservices, that's what we do. However, we like change, and we want to do refactoring because we can do whatever we want, right? So we're refactoring a large piece of Cloud Foundry. Why? Because we actually realize that we've introduced a couple interesting things as we've gone along. So this is kind of a high-level view of some important components to Cloud Foundry. Just really, really quick. The Cloud Controller, that listens to you in your API call. So when I was doing all those calls on the command line, the Cloud Controller was getting them. Health Manager monitors everything and makes sure when I want 3 instances, I have 3 instances. And if I don't, it puts a message on the bus for me. And by the way, that message bus is NATS. The router, we talked about, handles all that dynamic routing. And then there's this big pool of what we call droplet execution agents. And this is where your apps run, all right? So we have a technology called Warden that is a container technology built on Linux C groups, right? So we've done a lot because we saw Linux C groups as kind of not getting us all the way we needed, particularly from a network isolation perspective. So we did a lot around security, and this is where our apps run. And we went, we actually created some problems. So there's some tight coupling. The Cloud Controller, it knows the state of what apps are running on what DEAs. And if you've ever done anything with distributed systems, if you try to keep the state of the distributed system somewhere, it's always wrong. It's never up to date. That's just distributed systems, right? So there's kind of this weird sort of poor separation of concerns. There's some triangular dependencies where if the Cloud Controller comes offline, but it's already in the process of kind of deploying those applications, there's sort of this lack of acknowledgement, and all of a sudden it's in this weird state. We don't know if the apps have actually deployed or not. Also, we've really focused on apps, which is great from a developer perspective, but what about extending it to a much larger audience, right? What about batch type processing? What about these sort of long running tasks? What about single instance tasks where I just run them once and I need to know across my cluster that I've only run them once? So we need to get away from being domain specific, and we need to get away from being platform specific. So we really focused on Linux, which is great. We all like Linux, but not all enterprises are 100% Linux, right? How do we support .NET? How do we support Docker, right? Because everybody's looking at Docker, and what's great about Docker is it's a great way to package up your apps, but you have to run them too. So how can we provide a runtime for Docker apps? And then really what we found is we built this in Ruby. Ruby's great. Ruby's not so great for OS level high concurrency type systems. So we said, that's cool. We like this new Go thing. So we're going to rewrite, which we've already done to actually a lot of components in Cloud Foundry. We've rewritten them from Ruby to Go. So what does it start to look like, right? So if you think back, this is what we had. Cloud controller, health manager, big pool of DEAs, and this is what we're moving to. So now my cloud controller, instead of it knowing where it needs to put things in terms of this app runs on this container on this DEA, it just tells this stager, hey, I'm going to stage my app. Okay, so that meant take my app source code, combine it with that build pack we talked about, create the droplet. That is a single task, and it should only be run once in the cluster. Okay, well now we're going to create this concept of a task. All right, well now I've got my droplet created. I want to now run that application. So now I'm going to have this other thing, this other component that's its one job is to make sure that the app is running, right? To actually get it started. So it translates this idea of app into long-running process. So we're starting to move away, and we think we've got the right level of abstraction, right? From domain-specific app, right? Which is what you think about as a developer, to something a little more generic. And we've really taken this DEA pool and completely changed it. So this is what we call Project Diego. So you go out there and read a lot about Cloud Foundry. Diego is this really big thing. It is this idea of moving to a much more sort of continuum from specific to generic. So I take an app, it becomes a task or a long-running process. I've got a part called the rep that actually sort of takes that in. It talks to the exec, which turns it into a recipe. Not a chef recipe per se, right? But this recipe that says, hey, here's what it means to, here's what long-running process actually means. And then it tells this garden thing, because we're so clever with our naming. We took Warden and rewrote it in Go and put a G on the front. Nice job, guys. It manages those containers, but it just manages them. It's not the container technology itself, because this container technology could be different, right? So yes, we're going to support Linux, right? That's just what we do right now. But if you want to actually run .NET apps, instead of having to go through and sort of have .NET creep its way up here, because .NET just sort of creeps, you just put it all here. You have a different runtime container. And that's a much smaller set of code than having to rewrite all of this for .NET. Same thing with Docker. And actually, we're using the same kind of Linux type of capabilities to run Docker. Okay, so what does that look like? The cool thing is we actually have put together this video that shows it. So I'm just getting this started on my laptop. I'm using this technology called Bosch Lite to try and get it on my laptop. I couldn't get it to work, so I had to default back to the video. But what's really cool is what we did was we went out to Amazon and we set up, oh gosh, that is awful. All right, there's 10 machines up there, okay? So there's 10 machines out on Amazon that we've set up to run our containers, right? So they are this executor pool, and they have those processes on them. What I want to do is I want to actually tell them, hey, Cloud Foundry, right? Here's a Docker container. That's a very basic app that just kind of tells me which container I'm on, which instance I'm on. I want to go give that to you and have you deploy it in there, right? So just pure deployment of a Docker container. Okay, that's no problem. So, I have the CLI. It says CF beta, push Docker app name, right? That's pretty much what we did before. But if we scroll, oh, where are you? Too much zoom. We get ahead a little bit, right? So this is all pretty similar to what we were doing before, right? Setting some routing, deploying it, actually interacting with the runtime under the covers. And what I'll see is, once I start it up, all right, I now have one little dot. Now that dot is gray because you all have that Superman vision to be able to see that right now, right? But that dot basically turns green because now I've got an app running. All right, great. That's not any different than what we had before. We have an app running. Wonderful. What if I wanted to take that app and scale it to 300 instances, right? We're talking about web scale here, or hyperscale, or whatever buzzword hyphen scale you want to use, right? We're talking about lots of instances of things. If I want to do that scale, right, in lots of systems that are out there, even some PaaS type systems, that's going to take me a long time. 300 instances? Really? Cloud Foundry goes, ha ha ha, I will do 300 instances very quickly. And we can do that really quickly. So let's zoom here. Let's get to where we're doing it and deploying it. There it is. Okay, so this says CF scale -I 300 and the name of my app, right? That's what I used before when I scaled my application. Trust me, that's what it says. It's on YouTube. I can't lie on YouTube. Right? All right, so what happens here? Well, now I'm starting to get lots of gray dots saying, hey, all right, I'm going to start actually saying, hey, those are containers. All right, I need to create some capacity in my machines of containers for you. And then I'm going to start taking my green dots because those are deployed applications. Those are that Docker container, and I'm going to start deploying them. I'm going to go through, I'm going to do this, I'm going to just drink while I'm doing it. I'm scaling my app out. As a developer, all I did was CF scale 300. Sweet. And if I go and I look at the application, I can actually start to see, oh, I'm now on a lot of different instances. I am actually at 300 instances, right? And so once these are all green, okay, I'm at 300. This is not a fast-forwarded video, right? I just let it go. That's how long it took me to scale from 1 to 300. That's cool, right? That's what we need to have an innovation platform, right? To get back to those whole ideas, I need to be able to scale up that fast. Because as an enterprise, when I get demand on my system, instead of having to open tickets and set up virtual machines, that's too slow. I need to tell the platform, scale, because if I don't, I'm hosed, right? I can't go down. That's what Cloud Foundry is. So I will make these slides available because they have all the links in there. We're at All Things Open, so what is the open source slice to this? So like all major open source projects, there's a foundation. So we announced the foundation kind of towards the end of last year, and we really talked about it a lot at CF Summit. We've had a bunch of conferences. CF Summit, which happened earlier this year, and we really announced the foundation. So, you see a lot of big names up here, right? Pivotal, where I'm from, IBM, EMC, HP, dogs and cats that typically hate each other, right? We're partnering on this because we fundamentally all believe that Cloud Foundry is going to be what people call the operating system of the cloud, right? This is what you want to deploy your apps on top of. It should be that simple. And there's all sorts of people coming in here and starting to do it. Fundamentally, what I think is that if it's technology companies only, it's not that important, right? It's still just shiny toys. It's when you start to get telecom, financial services, when you start to get folks like the Docker crew are part of the foundation now, right? When you get folks like JFrog and Alpine and Piston and Mongo, like these are not just technology companies for technology. These are companies who fundamentally are using software to be their competitive advantage. And they're betting the farm on Cloud Foundry because that's how they go about it. Now, how do you get started with it? Well, if you can convince your company that you work for to send you to San Francisco for 8 weeks, here's one way to do it, right? So we have an open source dojo. You come to Pivotal Labs in San Francisco. It is as cool as startups are, right? They have a beer fridge. It's all open. There's ping pong. If you've ever read anything about Pivotal Labs and the way they do Agile, right? It's pretty cool. They do pair programming. They actually kind of embrace the whole concept. It blew my mind because I frankly thought pair programming would never work. I tried it once and it was miserable. it's really cool to go there. So go there anyways. But we work with all these different companies, IBM, SAP, Swisscom, Altros, Cloud Credo. They come in and they work side by side in a pair with the other developers that are part of Pivotal. And they work on the open source Cloud Foundry. So it's a great way to get involved with it. The other things you can do is go to some of these links, right? CloudFoundry.com, which is more about what we as Pivotal are bringing to the table around Cloud Foundry. CloudFoundry.org is more about the open source project itself. So what's going on with the community. You can find information about the advisory board that we've put together and their minutes and their recordings and all that good stuff. You can go out to YouTube. There's a ton of videos, including that one that I just showed you. Some of the stuff that we talked about, like microservices and Russ Miles anti-fragility, there's some links here. But this is what Cloud Foundry is. It's meant to be a platform that you take your app to and deploy it and not worry about infrastructure, right? So whether I'm running on vSphere or OpenStack or AWS or insert cloud provider here, shouldn't matter, right? Cloud Foundry was born in the cloud. It ran on vSphere for a while, and then we took it and we run it on AWS today. It lives with that mindset that infrastructure is a commodity, and I should just be consuming it that way. So that's what I brought for you all today. I think I've got 3 technical minutes. Does anybody have any questions, thoughts, concerns, tomatoes? Yes?
For when you give an execution pool like 10 servers, is one of those kind of, if you're deploying on your own bare metal, one of the hardware failure, you back something, will automatically like take that new server into the pool and then rescale out when it fails? I mean, in the example you show, like, it failed, you turn it off, but like, what if it's all hardware failure? That's probably
Sure. So Cloud Foundry is meant to run on virtualized infrastructure. And that's because we want to be able to spin things back up. So if your hardware under the covers falls apart, like let's use vSphere as an example. ESX host falls over, like physically, and the hardware just dies. What will happen is that this technology called BOSH under the covers will say, oh, I lost my machines, right? So I might have had a bunch of virtual machines that are in there that I now need to reprovision and set back up. BOSH will do all of that automatically. So one of the nice things about Cloud Foundry is there's these 4 levels of high availability, right? It's at the app level, it's at the process level, the virtual machine level, and now we have this concept of availability zone. So if you literally lose half your hardware, it still goes, right? And your apps don't go down. Great. Yes?
What's the process of migrating a legacy app? Do you rewrite it, do you have generators and take WebLogic and do that?
Yep, so it's on an app-by-app basis. Some existing legacy apps will just run. Great, wonderful. However, most don't. And this is definitely not a platform for just kind of the same mess for less, right? Where I just kind of take my legacy app and it just runs cheaper. You do have to fundamentally think about it. So there's guidelines like 12-factor apps that are really sort of meant for this. What we see most people do is they look at their legacy applications and they say, okay, can I start to break this into smaller services and start to push those onto Cloud Foundry? Or should I just wrap my legacy app in some kind of an API layer and then expose that as a service, and I build newer apps in Cloud Foundry that consume that service? It's not easy, but what we're finding is that people need to start rationalizing through their legacy to figure out how do we fit it into this new model, because this is a model that's more maintainable and easier. But it is a great question. It's hard. Anything else? Yes? Sure. So I think I heard your question. What's going on with Iron Foundry? So Iron Foundry is the guys that started to build Cloud Foundry for .NET. They're actually working with us. So if I go back to the Diego project, this is Linux. They're working on the Windows version of this. So we're taking the Iron Foundry code, kind of stabilizing it, getting it ready, and then they're going to fit right into this architecture here. But we work with them day in, day out. Awesome. So I think I ran out of time. I'm here. If you have questions, you want to come up, have a chit chat. I won't be running out just yet. But thank you all very much.